Well, that was unexpected. So the new Lord of the Rings series from Amazon, Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, has just wrapped up on Amazon. You can now catch all 8 episodes of the first season. I believe they've got like 7 to 9 or something of the seasons of this planned. I hope they get there. Not to give the game away, but I'm just going to come out with it and say it. I thought this was awesome. I had my doubts, I had worries, and I came to this like a week after the fact. My life was quite busy at the time, so I didn't get to see the first episode at the same time everyone else did. And so I heard a lot of stuff about it beforehand with regards to just people posting, oh, this is crap, this is rubbish, you dropped the ball, what a waste of money. And I was like, oh no, I really love Lord of the Rings, big fan of Lord of the Rings, please don't drop the ball. I watched the first 2 episodes because they kind of released them together. I thought I'd seen a different show to everyone else, to be perfectly honest. Regardless of what you think of the story, the characters, this, that and the other, purely from a technical standpoint, a visual standpoint, production design, special effects, costume design, all that stuff, just the world that they've created here, it's up there with what Jackson did with his original trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It sits alongside that trilogy perfectly. You believe this is the same world. They threw a ton of money at this. It cost like $1 billion or something for this first season, which is astronomical. But it shows from a production value standpoint, this is one of the best looking TV shows I've ever seen. Obviously, we've got to get to the things that are more important than that, because yeah, you can have great visuals, but if your characters and your story are just not interesting, then they don't matter. For me personally, I loved the characters in this and I loved the story. I found it engaging. So the series mostly centres around the character of Galadriel. I would say she's our central character. She's our kind of main protagonist, so to speak, if we have to point one out. We spend most of our time with her, I think. So it's Galadriel from the movie. We will know from the movies, if you've seen the movies. She's a lot younger here. She's a very different kind of character, although you can still see the strength in her, which you can see in Cate Blanchett's performance. Assuming that this is a prequel to those movies. But I really like her in this. I've seen some people say that she's only got one expression throughout the whole series, and I disagree. I think what she does from a performance standpoint throughout this season is exactly what is called of her to do, given who she's playing. She's playing an elf, a figure that is, quite stoic, quite reserved, or should be quite reserved for the most part. But she's very good emoting as well. She can do quite a lot with her stillness. She doesn't go big and go large all the time, which I think some actors would have a tendency to do. But she's able to get a lot out just with a look in her eyes. I think she's a really strong character as well, but that is never made strong at the expense of any of the male characters. I never go into anything like with opinions until I've watched it, but I will admit, having seen the trailers, the focus was on a lot of female characters doing action-packed stuff. I was worried that it was going to be, it was going to fall into that category of, oh yeah, the women can do it better than the men. What we get are strong female characters that are really engaging, but on the flip side of that, we get a lot of strong male characters that are really engaging. Now for me, episode 1 and 2 are really quite thrilling. They're brilliantly directed by J.A. Bayona, who you might know from the likes of The Orphanage, The Impossible, he just does a fantastic job. And seeing what he does with those first two episodes really kind of makes me wish he'd have directed the Hobbit trilogy. I think he would have done just such an amazing job with that trilogy. Yeah, so he does a fantastic job with those first two episodes, which are incredibly thrilling. I would say the next three episodes that come after that, they do dip a little with regards to pacing. I think they slow down a lot more. They're really more about character. Let's stick with these characters, find out about their worlds. And I think for a lot of people, they might say, "Oh, it's boring." I liked the fact that we took the time to get to know these people, see them kind of interact with each other, know what they were fighting for, really. You know, seeing the worlds they live in that they wish to protect. You know, it kind of makes everything that comes after that more, like, yeah, important, I guess. So you got those two episodes which are like up here. You got the next three which are still great, but like they're a bit more slower paced. And then the final three episodes, again, we're back up here as with the first two, where all the stakes are suddenly raised, everything's kicking off, and it's just a really great race to the finish line with some nice twists in the final episode. We kind of flit around from different groups of people's stories as they all start to converge. So you've got the hobbits and this guy who, like, my first instinct, as soon as he hit, that's got to be Gandalf. It's got to be Gandalf. I'm not going to give it away whether it is or it isn't, but that was my first instinct. So all the way through the season, I'm just thinking, right, okay, so this is Gandalf and the hobbits. That's the stuff that I would say for a lot of people they might find boring. I do think there are scenes with them that maybe go on longer than they should. They're a bit whimsical, maybe a bit too whimsical at times, although it does take a bit of a darker path at a particular point in the season. It gets a bit more interesting. Then we've got like the world of men, or one of the worlds of men. The world of men is kind of split in two. So we have like the Southlanders. They're people who kind of live a lot more rurally, and they're just basically fighting to stay alive, really. They come under attack from the orcs, from Sauron's minions. At least that's what it seems like at any rate. And then we have the other kind of side of the world of men, which is more regal, more royal, kind of extravagant side. You know, they live in a proper city that is built of stone and have a proper kind of culture that is rich in all kinds of, you know, artistic endeavours. And yeah, so they're kind of called into action. The onus is put onto them to come to the Southlands and get involved in this fight. And one of the people that is involved in or instrumental in kind of convincing them to do that is Galadriel. Then you've got the elves and the dwarves, Elrond and Durin, and they have this relationship where they've not seen each other for a while. That's because, like, elves obviously live with an eternal mindset, whereas dwarves don't, and it creates some upset. And how they kind of bond and get back together after a few years of not seeing each other, I found quite moving, and it really endeared me to these two guys, and I like to see them on screen. I like to see that relationship. And like I say, if you hadn't had those three episodes in the middle where everything kind of slowed down a bit and you concentrated on that stuff, you focused on those relationships, I don't think I would care as much. One of the relationships in the show that I would have liked them to have focused a bit more on is that between Bronwyn and Arondir. So Arondir is this elf, this male elf soldier, and he kind of has this thing for this human woman, and he's kind of sticking around because he loves her. You know, he doesn't have that drive like a lot of the other elves do to get back home. He's quite happy to stay there and be with this woman. And I do like their relationship. I liked it quite a lot. Like I say, there's times when we go away to, you know, we might go to the dwarves or the elves or the hobbits, and I'd say particularly when we go to the hobbits, I'm kind of like, you know, I could do with a bit more Bronwyn and Arondir time right now. This is definitely a show that you can clearly see is the beginning of something. Now, you go into this knowing it's called The Rings of Power. Now, there might be certain expectations there as a result of that title, but I think your outlook should be, how's this going to play out over multiple seasons? So for me personally, this is the best thing on television right now. That I've seen of the TV shows I've watched this year. And admittedly, I don't watch a right lot of TV. I'm more a movie guy. But there are certain things that when they come out, I feel like I've got to watch them. And this was a show that has been on my radar for a long time. I was hoping it was going to be good, and it's exceeded all my expectations. The hope that it was that it could match what Peter Jackson did, and that was always a vain hope. But watching it, I was like, oh my goodness, they've managed it. This is literally, yeah, this is up there with the movies. I do think Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies are still the benchmark, but I would put this over the Hobbit movies. I'd have no trouble saying that this series was better than the Hobbit movies, for sure. For me, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. Like I say, the stuff with the Hobbits at times, I find myself thinking I want to get to the other stuff. Any of the other stories that are going on, just go to them. Speed up the stuff with the Hobbits and go to the other bits, because I'm really enjoying those other bits. And every time we get to the Hobbits, I'm like, oh, okay, fine, fair enough. It's not to say I don't like that stuff. It's just that the other stuff is more interesting. So that's what knocks it down by that half for me. What about you? Have you watched all 8 episodes of this first season? If so, what did you think about them? Please leave your comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and until next time, cracking.